All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to another Athletics for Life podcast. In our show, we like to interview people in the world of sports and just delve into the lessons that you can learn in sports, how to improve our programs. We're both athletic directors in Mongolia, always seeking for new and interesting ways that we can make our programs better for our athletes. We interview athletic directors, former athletes, and interesting people in the world of sports. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest for today?
Yeah, so today we're going to Vietnam. This season we're traveling all over Asia and try to cover every country in Asia. And we're going to Vietnam right now. We're going to Hanoi. We're going to interview John Zahara, the athletics activities coordinator at UNIS Hanoi. We met John through the NIAAA 900s international courses, and we've been keeping in contact with John, and it was time to have him on the podcast. Very humble, passionate activities director, and we're very eager to learn from him today and to share his best practices with all of you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to John. He's got a wealth of experience. He sent over his biography, and he's taught all over the world, from Canada and the Bahamas, Oman, China, Africa, and now he's in Vietnam. Ton of professional development that I'm sure we'll delve into. Yeah, let's go to Vietnam and talk to John.
Let's go.
To start us off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about kind of where you're from, where you're at, and your story?
Sure. So first thing is, I really appreciate it, both of you. I know that you guys are up into the 30s of the podcast, so I really appreciate it. It's great to see what you're doing and talking to a lot of the ADs in Asia as well, and kind of the focus recently, and a lot of mutual friends, I'm sure, and reaching out over LinkedIn, and I think it's, as you guys have said and Jeff has said as well, it's a great network if people out there are not on it. So it's a great way to connect. But so like I said, my name is John Zahara. I'm originally from the east of Canada. I'm from the province of Nova Scotia. I'm probably in my, maybe my 20th year involved in education and sport in some way. I'm from a small island off the East Coast. I'm from an island called Cape Breton Island. And so I did most of my education in the east of Canada. So I have an undergrad in kinesiology and sports science. Then I followed that up with a graduate program, education, but the focus again was in sport, physical education. And I like most of us, I had a professor that, he kind of recommended that I go overseas when I was younger. And so I was able to go overseas, and I went to the Middle East. That was pre-conflict days. So I had a great time in the Middle East. I kind of get into curriculum development, and then one thing led to another. I was in the Caribbean. I was in sports administration. And then after, as you guys can appreciate, after you've been away for a long time, I decided to go back to Canada for a few years, and then got back into sports admin again. And then got the itch to travel again. So then end up going back overseas. Like the last 10 years have been, spent about close to 10 years in Africa, before Vietnam. So I was in Central Africa in an American school, and then I did 7 years at the International School of Uganda. And now I'm at UNIS Hanoi in Vietnam. So I've been a whole bunch of different types of positions, from activities director to head of department to head of physical education, to my second love is also history. So there was a chunk of my career that I was in I was a history teacher. So I did that for a long time, world issues and history. So, but I always wanted to come back to activities and arts and sports, as you guys can appreciate, right? So growing up, when I was younger, my mom, my dad, my grandparents are always involved in sport. My dad actually, he holds a record in Eastern Canada for the most years played in competitive softball, baseball. He played like 6 decades. So he kind of influenced me to get into sport. It's a little bit of a crazy record, I know. But then, my sisters, they're into the arts, and my brother worked for the United Nations, and so he traveled a lot. So yeah, it's kind of a combination of my background kind of pushed me abroad. And yeah, I'm in year 17 or 18 abroad now. So yeah, I'm in Hanoi at the moment. So yeah, it's been a great journey. It's been good fun.
I think that's an amazing record to have. 60 years of playing.
Oh,
Wow.
unbelievable. Yeah, he started in the late 50s, and he finished, I think I ended up playing the last couple of years with him, but he was a pitcher, and he finished in 2007 or maybe 2008, before he finished. And yeah, he's a little bit of a local legend. So when anytime I play baseball, I try not to tell people my last name because they associate that with my dad.
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah,
yeah,
better not know.
no, exactly right. Are you Zahara? No, that's not me. I'm not the baseball player, but no. But yeah, over the years, it's been great fun. It's like you guys, it's enjoyable, and yeah, it's a interesting time to be overseas, to say the least, right?
Definitely. And we're gonna go to that topic a little bit later for sure, I bet.
Yeah.
So, John, you've been at many schools all over the world. How do you pick the schools you're going to, or the cultures, the countries? How do you choose?
Yeah, Jeff, honestly, that's a great question, right? I think for the most part, again, I think it comes down to your passion, but also, if you have one, two, three, or four passions of like whether maybe you like geography, history, or maybe you're into hiking. So I think it's a good balance between your professional, like what you're an expert in, but also, as you guys know, is it something that can fit and tick all the boxes? So for me personally, I've always tried to go to a region that obviously number one is does it fit for your position, but number two is can you easily travel from there, right? So like in the Middle East, when I was in the Sultan of Oman, it was a great time to be there. So you could easily go off to Jordan or Lebanon, those places. But as you guys can appreciate being in Asia, you can get some cheap flights and you can go around. So I think it's a balance between professionalism and what your personal interests are, right? So yeah, and I think as you get older, it changes over time, right? Those early days are long gone by now, right? So yeah, but it's a balance, right?
Definitely. How were the different schools that you were at in terms of kind of the challenges you faced, maybe with where you were in the world, or maybe with the size of the school, that sort of stuff?
No, yeah, and that's a great question too. So, with my background, so when I first started, obviously in Canada, most people in Canada start off in the public system, right? So you're looking at, I mean, it ranges. If you're like a middle school teacher or a high school teacher as a young kid, starting off in education and physical education. So I started off in that route, and then when I went overseas, it ranged. It went from a small Caribbean school in the Bahamas, where I really, started to really get into the sports admin. That was a private American school, so they had their own curriculum. And then, like in Africa, the American school obviously had their American curriculum. In ISU in Uganda, they had the IB World Curriculum, so they had their PYP, MYP, DP program. And then, as you guys know, at UNIS Hanoi, they have the IB program, but also because they're a UN school, they're affiliated with the way they structure it with the SDGs of the United Nations. So in my career, I've done the British system, the American system, the Canadian system, private, public, and also like with the international, like I said, the international IB program. So over the last 20 years, it's been a little bit of a mishmash of here and there. But for me personally, I'm a big fan of the IB program. But I have a lot of experience with the American curriculum as well. So it depends on what you like, right? What your passion is. But with me, with sport and activities and arts and athletics, I naturally kind of gravitate towards the IB program.
Yeah, we have the IB here at the international school. CD has been at the American school, American curriculum, now at the British school. So he's seen both. I only know the IB. So I love the program too, and it really connects well with our athletics philosophy too. John, question for you is, you've been around, what's a good school, good place to start at as you're like an upcoming AD or new in a role? Would you say a more bigger school or a smaller school, or what would you tell those people starting in the AD job?
Yeah, I think honestly, I see a lot of, like, recently, going back, I'm not sure your exact ages here, but if you go back even 15 years, the AD was like a slowly evolving job, right? It's not like today where, most schools have one or two with the assistant and the AD. It was always like, are you the AD? Do you have, do you have to teach a few lessons of high school to go with that? You'd see a lot of ADs teaching a grade 10 MYP course. So I see a lot of younger AD that are trying to get into the program. They're trying to jump into maybe some of the larger schools. I don't necessarily think that's the best way forward. In my experience, I think probably the best way forward is kind of take your path, take your route, and be a little bit more systematic about it, and try to learn the ropes from your colleagues and get some expertise from some of the people that have been in the game a long time. I think an assistant AD role obviously is a great way to start. And even if you did it as a mentor, like being mentored by somebody else for a couple of years, 2-3 years, and then kind of branching out and kind of, extending your wings a little bit, and then going into like a mid-range school. So to answer your question, Jeff, I think honestly, if it was me starting all over again, and I was, 26, 27 years old, and, you finished everything, you're a phys ed teacher, or maybe got your qualifications through the NIAAA, whatever it may be, I would probably go to like the mid-range level, like between, I mean, as you guys know, it all depends on the size of the school, but I would say maybe like a 500 range, a 600-700 range, and then kind of get your feet wet a little bit. And then as you kind of learn the ropes, then you can start to look at some of the more major schools. Because as you guys can appreciate, once you get into mid-range, all of a sudden it amplifies to a serious level. When you get to over 1,000, 1,300, 400, it's a whole nother level of organization. And that comes in, now you have to have a support team. And then, so to answer your question, I would say I would start off mid-range. And then I would get advice from ADs that have been in the game for a while, and see if it's yours. We all know that the average lifespan of an AD is a lot shorter than what people want to admit to. We're looking at 2 to 4 years at bet. So yeah, I think mid-range would probably be my advice at this point.
Well, in retrospect, that's pretty good for me, because you pretty much laid out my path. I started as a science teacher at a school of 500-600, and then the AD had to leave, had some personal issues that came up mid-year, and I had been coaching, so I just kind of stepped in and filled in for him to finish out the year. And then the next year, I was like, well, why don't we give this a shot? And then hooked up with the NIAAA, took some courses. Now I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years. So how would you describe your transition? Like, at first, did you feel overwhelmed? Did you feel it was natural, or? A little of both. I think I've been involved in sports for a long time. So in some regards, it was very natural, right? Just to help organize, have a hand in everything. But in other ways, it was a little bit hectic, because I'm a science teacher by qualification. And now with the AD role, I'm teaching PE classes.
Yeah.
So on top of learning, okay, how do I do this AD thing? How do I take kids to China? I've also got to teach about 3/4 of a load of PE classes. So, how do I mark in a PE class? How do I give grades in a fair, appropriate way? So all the kind of extra stuff that came along with the job was a learning curve, we'll say. So.
Absolutely. And I think oftentimes, and I think, I'm sure Jeff would agree, that a lot of times when the AD position comes up, oftentimes it will go internal. And if it doesn't go internal, then they look outside. But at the same time, they have to realize you have to have some level of institutional knowledge at that school in order to take a certain role on. I've always found like the ADs that are externally hired coming into a new system, it generally takes a good year to two to kind of get your feet wet, kind of understand the culture of the school. So for every person, their journey is so different, right? But I like you said though, and I'm sure Jeff, like we all know that we've been through the NIAAA. That's a great starting point, right? I mean, that's a great network, great professionalism, great courses. So yeah.
Yeah, the NIAAA really helped out quite a bit just to wrap my head around everything that it entails. And if I did ever go back to the States, what would it entail there?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think personally, I'm at this stage now. Just speaking about going back to Jeff's original question about what route would you take? I think I'm at that point now in my career where I'm 42, where I've had different roles in leadership that I've kind of shifted away kind of from sport admin, if that makes sense. I'm focusing a lot more on the leadership, professional development. Just as it's nothing against the actual profession itself. I see it as the job itself is always changing, and you're working with so many different types of people, that sports admin is incredibly important, as we know. But like going into like the leadership style of courses that you're one day you're talking with finance, the next day you're with advancement, the next day you're talking to PE teachers, you're talking to arts people, so you're all over the place, right? So I think if you can diversify the PD as well, but coming back to the NIAAA, kind of get your fundamentals, get your base, and then go from there.
Hey, John, you talk about the NIAAA already. You finished your CIAA, right? Your international course?
I did, yeah.
Are you planning on going to your certified master certification?
Yeah, honestly, Jeff, I would love to do it. I mean, as we know, it's a little bit difficult to travel at the time. I know with Denver coming up, some people are going, but it's a bit tricky. But some of us are doing the online courses, kind of prepping, going even further. So yeah, at the moment, I think I'm going to take a few courses throughout the year and kind of see the lay of the land, and then hopefully, if I'm not mistaken, I think next year's course might be in Nashville, Tennessee. So probably what I'll do is I'll do as many courses as I possibly can to kind of fill that gap. And then next year, in December, I'll try to finish it off, right? Because I mean, as you know, there's so many prerequisites that you need to be certified, right?
Yeah, a lot actually. And if you have your CAA, which is a requirement for the certified master, you have to wait a year kind of to do more courses because you start from zero. It's a long process, but a very good one. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have you finished your CAA also, John? Or?
So I haven't applied officially for it. I finished all the courses for it, so I have to go through that process, and then so I was kind of like on that route, and then they announced that they were going to do the CIAA. So I was kind of like torn, like which route do I go? So I talked again, going back to our original conversation, talking to some of the older ADs that have been around for a long time. I said, look, what route would you recommend? Guys that have been in the game for 20, 25 years, like David Getz in Johannesburg at the American School and others. They said, John, if I were you, it's the first cohort, go the CIAA, and then from there you can always navigate. Because if you're not going to go back to the stateside or Canada, focus on the international. And I was interested in the fact that the lens of international AD was kind of my focus at the time, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the CAA is difficult because it's so US based and all the law stuff. We talked with Sim about that too last time because he's from Australia, right? But it's a requirement if you want to have the certified master one. So it's just something you have to do. But I'm also saying you can learn a lot from the US based kind of law, Title IX thing. So yeah, it's just a great thing to do actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to say that too, Jeff, because like if you look at the actual courses that we all know through the NIAAA, like the legality and the law courses and child protection and safeguarding, a lot of those courses were fantastic because it really prepped me for UNIS Hanoi. because UNIS Hanoi, they have a certain mandate when it comes to child protection and safeguarding. Even if you go on their website, they're very adamant that you have to have a certain background when it comes to child protection and safeguarding. And I felt like I took a lot of those courses through the NIAAA. And so I took a lot of electives as well each year. So I've been taking the courses for a number of years now, like probably 4 or 5 years now. And so I felt like it was a natural progression that when I applied to UNIS Hanoi, I had that background when it came to the child protection and safeguarding. So it worked out well, like for both parties, right?
Yeah, I feel like the NIAAA courses just help kind of make you think about how you do your job, right? Even if, like Jeff had mentioned, it's law and it's the United States law, and it might not apply in Mongolia. It definitely makes you think about how you're running your program. You know, we talked to Laura Davies on the last episode, just about girls in sports. And I remember one of the courses, I don't remember exactly which one, but they were talking about the legalities of, you know, practice times and making sure there's equal access and facilities. And it's sometimes just something that you kind of overlook, right? And you don't realize that you're doing something that's not really fair to one team or one gender or one age group, just because it's always been done that way.
No, definitely. And, you know, and that's a great point, honestly, because I remember like the early days, well, not early days. It's not that I've been in the game for 30 years, but I remember even a decade ago, being involved in international activities in sport. And, you know, some schools didn't have that rule that you had to have a balance and equity of female and male chaperones on trips, right? And we say that now as, you know, that's kind of like the lay of the land, and that's common. But I remember when it was always something that was brought up. And so we've gone over the course of 10 years, we've seen how not just the position, but how activities in sport have evolved in regards to policy, right? So we went from you got to have a little bit of equality and equity in regards to gender, and now we're going into different roles and different avenues when it comes to kids from different backgrounds, different orientations. So, you know, every year it's continually changing. So it's a fascinating field to be in, to be honest. I couldn't imagine being in any other profession at this point in time. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting right now, especially with all the extra protocols we have to have in place.
Oh.
What I love with the NIAAA and all the courses is first of all the networking we're doing, right? So you learn so much from people, and I think that's the main benefit from it. Like, we're a bit isolated here in Mongolia. You know, it's a small country, a few ADs. So reaching out to people like you and others is just what the NIAAA has given us the last 2 years. So that's just amazing.
And you know, Jeff, honestly, it's you hit the nail on the head. And obviously, you know, COVID has amplified this, but being in a virtual world, you know, the old days of you'd only see people at a conference, where now we can reach out, we can have these real-time, you know, conversations and discussions and look at your expertise and see everybody else's expertise. And if you're a country where you maybe, you know, like when I was in East Africa, in Uganda, you know, I was there 7 years. And so, you know, you reach out to the local ADs, but at the same time, you know, you're looking at the regional. So I think it's a great network, but in general, you know, when you look at policy development and implementation, it's great to kind of reach out and kind of see what other people are doing, and then take a step back and say, how does this affect our kids at our school and our faculty, and what's the best way forward when it comes to the policy development, if that makes sense? Because I'm right now currently at UNIS Hanoi, you know, and as you guys know, it's a UN school, but we're looking at transgender, we're looking at non-binary, we're looking at orientation, and so we're trying to lock down our policy and make sure that it's up to date. But I've had the opportunity to reach out to like people from Africa, people from Europe, ISB Bangkok, and just what's everybody doing? Like, you know, we're all in this together. And I think oftentimes as an AD, you guys can appreciate, sometimes you're on an island. And so you're trying to figure out, is this the right way, the correct way forward? So yeah, I agree. I think connecting is phenomenal, you know?
So you talked a little bit about your school and coming up with policies. Can you talk a little bit more about the school that you're currently at? What programs do you have? What conferences are you in? What's like there?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, UNIS Hanoi is, it takes a slightly different approach. It's a United Nations international school. There's two currently in the world. There's one in New York City, and then there's one in Hanoi. And that kind of evolved from the post-war of Vietnam, and then, the international community came in to help out and try to help the country get back on its feet, so that there was a huge surplus of foreigners that from around the globe. So that's kind of where the school kind of was born, and that's, where the logo or our team is the phoenix, kind of rising out and moving forward. So UNIS Hanoi they follow an IB World program, the traditional PYP, MYP, DB program. The program itself in activities is kind of a wide scope. So on top of it, we have like the after school activities. We have our community program, which is huge. Currently we have about 40 programs. We have our music academy, tennis academy, aquatics academy, our JV, our varsity teams. We have a leadership, sustainability groups, Model United Nations. So, it's very diverse in that sense. It keeps it really interesting, and it keeps it kind of fresh in the fact that we're going in many different directions. But I think personally, one of the things that I personally enjoy about, and I'm new to UNIS, for people that are listening, I've only been there for about 4 months at this point in time. I've had some good friends that have worked at UNIS over the years, and they always recommend, hey, I think you would like UNIS, John, check it out. I think one thing that I really do like about UNIS is they have these sustainable goals from the United Nations. So on top of the IB program, they have, these goals from the United Nations that they implement into their curriculum. And so it could be anything from the climate to gender equality or equity. And so that kind of, even starting at an early age, the kids are exposed to it. So by the time that they graduate, they have the IB aspect, the attitudes, the learner profile, all the conceptual learning, in addition to the lens of the United Nations, which is quite unique and kind of cool. And I try to implement that into my activities program. So a lot about like educational based activities is kind of like the focus that I take at UNIS Hanoi at the moment.
Yeah, we had a student from the international school actually who moved to UNIS 2-3 years ago because his mom worked for the United Nations here in Ulaanbaatar. You maybe know him, Tomaki Tahara. Maybe you've seen him.
Okay.
So you said a little bit about the educational-based athletics. What's kind of the difference that UNIS does in your program? Can you give us a specific? Because we might be able to implement that here.
Sure. Yeah, and like, I mean, Jeff, everybody has their own take, right? Like everybody has their own approach to how they think it would work best, right? So at UNIS Hanoi, one thing that I'm passionate about, and I did the same thing at the International School of Uganda, is I look at the IB program. I look at the attitudes, I look at the learner profile, and then UNIS has their own value system. They have 6 values that they roll out. They just actually updated them this year. And so what I do with my teams in particular, not just the sports teams, but the actual, the arts and leadership teams, is when they get together, we do like a lot of goal setting. And so I'll just give a practical example. So for example, the basketball team, right? The varsity basketball team. What they do is when they get together at the beginning of the school year, they discuss the IB program, but they also discuss what they want to do skill wise. I mean, we all know the SMART goals, but they always want to do like personal, but also like as a group, right? So it's something that they want to do academically, but also as a team. So one of the things that the teams will do, and of course I know it's COVID, so we have to focus on reality and mental health and those type of things and balance, but the teams will goal set based on the IB program, right? So they may identify attitudes or aspects of the learner profile, and they'll implement that into the goal setting process. So they might focus on empathy, It could be collaboration or communication. And so they pick 2 or 3, right? And then they goal set based on those concepts for the school year, so that it's always it's always a reoccurring theme throughout the season. So whatever they're learning in the classroom in grade 8, the coach is also trying to further enhance the conceptual side of it on the team, so that it becomes a natural progression, if that makes sense.
Because that sounds awesome. Does the coach, do you discuss that with the coaches at the preseason meetings, or are you pushing that, or is the coach really engaged in that? I'm just wondering how you implement that.
Yeah, and I'm going to be perfectly honest. I mean, every coach is different. I may have an American coach that is very competitive. I may have a Dutch or a German coach that kind of is maybe they're a little bit more balanced. But they're very aware that with educational based activities, we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So we're all aware that goal setting is an important part of it. It has to be organic. It has to come from the kids, but also has to come from the coach themselves. And then they have to come together and make that bridge, right? So like at UNIS Hanoi, the theme this year is building bridges, and that comes from the head of school. So if they can come together to goal set, but at the same time be realistic, authentic, and valid in their approach, and say, these are our 3 goals, this is how we're going to accomplish it. And then that kind of goes throughout the season. And then, well, I mean, we've been virtual for 4 months. So and that's another conversation or topic we can get into, but we're the Phoenix. So we get into the Phoenix pride of, let's acknowledge what the kids have done, but let's take a look at where do we start and where do we finish? And it's a continuum. It's a continuum of learning, right? So
we'll just gloss over the competitive American stereotype real quick. My most competitive coach was actually a lady from Canada. So
okay.
you remember, Jeff, Amy was incredibly competitive. She coached the basketball team with me, and yeah, she was great though. She was a wonderful coach. We've mentioned it a little bit. We've kind of skirted around it. But how has it impacted you and your programs? I know you're new at UNIS Hanoi, so maybe even talk a little bit about Uganda and now moving to a new school. What's the impact that COVID's had?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as the both of you guys can appreciate, I was in Uganda in March of 2020 when it hit, right? And, as we know, as ADs, it dropped like a bomb, right? And most of us were probably in the middle of a season. I personally, I was coaching the varsity girls team, and our teams were getting ready for the 3rd season. So, we had a STEM team that was traveling. We had our football team was going to Johannesburg. So for us, it was, how do you revamp the program on the fly? And I think for most people, it was quite stressful, like how do we navigate this virtual world, right? And UNIS Hanoi, it's a bit different. So they've been unique in that last year they were on campus most of the year. So even though they weren't involved in APAC or Marissa, in Southeast Asia, or even locally within the Hanoi League, they were very fortunate that they were on campus. So they were able to have their practices, which was very different than Uganda, because in Uganda it was just cut off. It was, okay, boom, varsity's done, arts is done, leadership, we're done. So when I went into UNIS Hanoi, we actually went into virtual. And a lot of the teachers, they had anxiety. They didn't know if they wanted to commit. As you can appreciate, are we going to have a tournament, or like what's the exit strategy for this virtual program? So it was a lot of human capital, basically trying to get people to buy into the program. And I really had to spend a good month or 2 before I arrived on the scene, not knowing that we were going to go virtual, because at the time I wasn't sure, but we ended up going virtual for 4 months. So it's required a lot of team effort, a lot of creativity, resilience, dedication. But personally, in my opinion, I think that we've done a really good job with the kids. virtually, considering the situation.
What's the situation right now and looking forward to the next few months, John? Can you do some sports in the future, or it's going to be virtual till Christmas?
I think at the moment, I think you'll see the kids come back probably late November. So I think you'll get them back on campus. The vaccination in Hanoi is quite high, but as you can appreciate, the governments in Asia, they're being a little bit cautious. I don't think that you'll see any type of normalcy probably until January or maybe even early February. But again, at the same time, in my opinion, in my experience, I took my experience from Uganda being in lockdown, bringing it to Hanoi, where a lot of the teachers and coaches and sponsors and instructors don't have that experience starting a school year off virtually. So you can imagine how much anxiety and questions that they had. So I had to frame it in a way that if we do this together and have a structure, that'll be successful for the kids. And to be honest, Jeff, like, our middle school basketball teams, we have 40 middle school basketball players, and their attendance rate is 95% virtually twice a week for an hour each. So I think they want that connection, right? They just want to be a part of a team, and they miss it, right? But to answer your question, I would say probably late January, realistically, we'll probably start to kind of branch out a little bit.
Yeah, super creative. All these ADs these days, doing these virtual programs, you get 95 kids percentage online. That's amazing. That's just, I wish we could get that too.
Yeah, and look, and we all know every school is so different, right? Honestly, it depends on the history. A lot of schools, they did COVID right from the start, from March, where they were shut down for a long time. Like I said, maybe that played a part of it, that UNIS was on campus. So I was looking at what type of program can we actually do virtually that would so my biggest thing with the virtual program was support for the coaches, right? I mean, I love the kids, of course, we all love the kids, and that's the number one reason. But based on my experience in Africa, I knew that if I didn't support the coaches and instructors, the program would most likely not be a success, or it wouldn't even get off the ground. So one of the things was, would you like me to kind of go in like how I structured it? Yeah. So one of the things, I looked at the stipends, of course. I mean, we all look at that as ADs, like how much money we're going to pay people. So I only reduced it slightly. I knew that I didn't want to, put people off by, oh, by the way, I'm going to pay you 50% less. I respect the fact that it took creativity and resilience and patience. So I kept that as is, right? And then I created like a 15-page document, kind of like a blueprint of like goal setting, like you just said, educational based activities. And so what we did is that we structured in a way, there was a couple times a week, they came together, and then every second week they had like a Phoenix League of Champions where they could actually do challenges and have fun with it. So it wasn't so serious. I mean, we had skill based, and then we had the goal setting aspect to it. Another one that there's a great app called Sworkit, and they really diversified their program in the last couple of years. So now they're geared towards schools and not individuals. So I was able to purchase that for the school so that every kid in the school from grade 1 to grade 12 has full access to it. It's an American app, but then I also purchased it for the faculty as well, for the staff. And so it's an awesome app. It's got like 1,000 exercises. It's got great challenges. So we did that. My fitness instructors, they're fantastic. They're both Vietnamese. So twice a week after school, they did live sessions. We had the link that went in, and so that people could join even if they weren't athletes, and even parents at home if they wanted to join in. Another thing is that we did a website, so we consolidated all of the resources at UNIS, because they had like PE resources, and then they had like elementary PE resources. So we made this really kind of a functional website that everybody could kind of channel to. And so then we created live challenges. So we had like an art challenge and a photo challenge and a fitness challenge, and every 2 weeks we changed it out to be realistic, so that when you go into the website and you log in, you can actually log into the challenge aspect. You can see the description, and when you click on like update or like put your challenge in, whatever that you're doing, it kind of got filtered through our department so that we could see what was coming in, and then from there we could highlight it in the newsletter each week. We had our athletic trainer that was doing like core exercises and stretching with the faculty and the kids. We had morning sessions with the PE teachers that every morning for 20 minutes, we had live sessions. My aquatics director and my tennis guy, because of COVID, they weren't doing tennis and they weren't doing aquatics and swimming. So they became our morning guys, our morning session guys, to kind of get the kids moving, get them up and moving in the homerooms. So it was kind of like a whole approach of one thing, and it was a great team effort. And so we just tried to come together as a team to say, how can we best support it going forward? And so far, it's, it seems to me like the kids like it, and people are involved. So, at this point, we feel good about it,
That's amazing, John. It sounds like with something like that, why would you go back to in-person learning?
No, I won't go that far. I miss the kids.
Yeah, definitely. John, we're getting close to the end. So maybe just another question or two for you.
Sure.
I don't know after that if you've got something else, but what's something that you've been kind of most proud of as your time as an athletic director? Something that you've accomplished or something that you've been able to do?
Wow.
What's something you're proud of?
I think as an AD, like you guys too, like you're always looking at something like moving forward. How can you best support the kids, right? Especially with the COVID thing, because like I took it as a personal challenge, and again, it totally depends on the demographic, and there's historical variables that go into play. And did you start off in COVID? Did you not start in COVID? So I mean, personally, something that I've been proud of, and I'm sure you guys are the same, like, you're invested in the kids, and you love what you do. I think one thing that personally for being proud is that I always try to strike a balance. I try not to put so much emphasis on sport, whereas I'm trying to start to develop a little bit more of a balance with the arts. So like right now I put in, I'm trying to build up a dance program at UNIS, hopefully in the future. In addition to they, of course, they have like choir and band, orchestra. So I think I've always tried to strike a balance. And I think the other thing that I've been proud of is, I've been involved with PYP and MYP, or, as you guys like the American system too, is I always tried to make sure that I don't solely focus on secondary school or high school. I've always tried to make sure that I think of the little guys first too, right? I always try to think of the little ones and make sure that they're just as equally important as the older ones. Because I've found over the years, even when I wasn't an AD, there was so much emphasis on the competitive side of the upper echelon of the sport, whereas sometimes like grade 3, 4, 5, they kind of get left behind a little bit. So I think if I would say the balance, and then with the arts, trying to make sure that everybody feels supported, has been something I've really tried hard over my career.
John, you just, I saw it on LinkedIn, you finished your certification from Harvard for school management. You're working on the NIAAA courses. What are some of your professional development goals and goals for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm sure as you guys can appreciate, a lot of people that have been an AD, whether it be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, they can tell you that your skill set, right? You're doing so many things at once. We all know that, right? From finance to you're trying to hire a coach and you're trying to do the best you can. So for me personally, I've seen a lot of people go into to be like a principal or a vice principal or a coordinator. That for me personally, that's not my goal. I still want to continue to be an activities director. So looking forward, I'm not really looking more towards the IB as that much anymore. What I'm looking forward to is more like the leadership style PD. And like you said, like Harvard course has a great course. It takes about a year, but straightforward. It's meant if you're working, which is a great program. But there's a lot of universities out there that they offer a lot of leadership programs. So at the moment, if we're talking like directly of what I'm looking for personally, so Harvard has a new program that if you finished the certification in School of Management and Leadership over the last year, because it's fairly new, right? It's only a couple of years old. If you graduate from that program, then you can go into the next elevator program, which is brand new in January of 2022. And it's all about like strategic development. But with that said, I'm also looking at some of the conferences in Asia, like ERCOS and others that they offer, like because we all know that AD conferences and PD is not easy, right? There's very limited outside of the NIAAA. It's quite tough, to be honest, right? So I think right now my focus is not necessarily sports admin for this year or maybe the year after. It's more about the leadership style and kind of helping my team. So like I'm focusing like on learning journeys at the moment with my aquatics director and my team and my Vietnamese staff and my tennis guys and trying to help support them. So I feel like it's in my best interest if I can kind of look towards more leadership style PD, which is reasonably, not super expensive, but I can actually do this as I'm working at UNIS. So that's kind of like my immediate goal, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, John. And it's good to, like you said, you've taken time to set goals with your teams. You've got personal and professional goals. It's very evident just from talking with you in this short hour. I guess last question for us. What are some tips that you have for new athletic directors, upcoming athletic directors, as they start their journey wherever they're at?
Sure. And that's a great question. I mean, CD, like you know better than anybody, like we've all come into being an AD in all different avenues, right? I don't think there's any one-step process or five-step process where, hey, you're going to be an athletic director, an activities director. It doesn't work that way. We all know that, right? Everybody kind of arrives at the scene in different ways. I think if I were to give, advice to somebody that's kind of new to the game, and it's interesting that you said that, honestly, because I have two friends of mine I can think of right now. They're both American, and they're trying to get into the scene. They're trying to become athletic directors, and they're in the international game, like they're in the international school scene. They just want to know what's the approach, what's the best way forward. Honestly, I think for all of us, tips wise, number one, if you're at a school or if you're in an association, I would definitely take the time to learn the handbook of the school. Like I'm talking about like the activities co-curriculum handbook, the regional handbook, like if it's like within Mongolia, but then even more regional, so that you're very, very well aware of the landscape that you're trying to navigate. And then on top of that, after you've become very familiar with what you're dealing with, I would make sure that you take the time to trying to build those relationships with the people that you're around to kind of build that human capital. Because I think without other people, your program, if you come into a program or if you're hired into a program, if you don't have support of the people on the ground, you're going to struggle as an athletic director and activities director. So I think making sure that you have the structure in place, whether it be meetings or goal setting together, to make sure that you're on the same page. So to answer your question, I would say become familiar with your surroundings, but also think about those relationships, because you can be an expert AD, you can be an expert on sport, activities, and arts, but if you don't have those, it's very, very difficult to move forward.
Yeah, definitely, John. And connected to that, like as a newer AD, when would you suggest that they move on? Because that's a difficult topic too. When have you done enough? When have you do you have the skills acquired to move on? That's sometimes difficult because we all want to go to that big international school, right? But when do you go there?
Yeah, I mean, that's $1 million question, right? Like I'll be perfectly honest with you. When I was in sports admin when I was a bit younger, and then I got away from it for a number of years, and then I came back to it. in Uganda, I was running the junior school program, the elementary school program for 5 years. And the school kept, hey, do you want to be the whole school AD? And I said, look, I want to focus on the PYP, diversify my career, my CV, everything. So for me personally, I wanted to see the progression from early childhood to grade 5 first and be a part of that program and then become the larger AD. And then now I kind of have that context. So it's a great question. I think the time comes to move on when you feel as though you met your goals, right? And I honestly think that there's no set time. I think generally speaking, at bare minimum has to be about 3 years, right? I think if you're at a school for less than 3 years and you're an athletic director and you leave, that's very, very difficult to get a sense of consistency and the way it's going to go. So I would say minimum 2 to 3 years. But like I said, if you feel that you have the skill set, if you feel like you're supported and you have the professional development and you want to go to the larger international school, like if you wanted to go, for example, to, Shanghai American, which is a big school, or maybe ISB Bangkok, or some of these bigger schools of IASIS, right? I'm just thinking like Asia wise. I think it's focus on your goals, focus on your initiatives, and if you feel that you're comfortable and you have great support, then test the waters and see what happens, right? I mean, it's all about timing too, you know. And all of us, you have such individual skill sets that sometimes you don't even realize it until you shift and go to the next school and what you bring to the table, right? So if that makes sense, because I think what we do is, as an athletic director and activities director, if you're not solution based, I mean, that's what we do. Every day is a different day. So you wake up and it could be finance, it could be anything. We all know that, right? We're all smiling because we all know.
Yeah, every day I walk to work and I'm like, what's going to happen today, right?
100%. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. But it keeps it interesting, right?
Very interesting. John,
Yeah.
we could talk with you for hours, and we should definitely do a follow-up in the future. But we want to thank you so much for being here today with us. Last week, I told Lara, like, I'm going to steal your ideas. Now, I have a few from you that I'm going to steal too, if that's okay with you. It's a
No,
pleasure,
absolutely.
John. Pleasure.
Yeah, and it's a pleasure for both of you. And like I said, I think as ADs, most of the time, we're only one or two of us in a school. I think we're all in it together. The kids are number one, and I think we can share through LinkedIn or through other media sources. We can share ideas and try not to invent the wheel, and we come together as a team and international ADs. That, like, I think what you guys are doing with your podcast is fantastic, and I'll support it, and I've told others to support it. So yeah, I look forward to the future, guys. It was great touching base with. It was good fun.
Yeah, thanks, John. Definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure, guys.
All right, so we just sat down with John Zahara, teaching at UNIS Hanoi in Vietnam. Great interview. We even sat after we hit the record button and chatted for another 10-15 minutes. And I think we could have talked hours, Jeff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we should do a follow-up. It's so easy when you interview people like John, they just can't go on and go on, and we're just chatting on the side, like how many questions, and it's already 40 minutes. So, John, thank you again for sharing all your expertise.
Yeah, and my big takeaways from our interview with John is just how student-centered he was. He mentioned multiple times, so we do it for the students. His take on online learning, like, I mean, I kind of joked about why would anyone want to come back to in-person learning with an online program like that, and just having all those things for kids. When he mentioned having an online, like a virtual basketball practice, I was like, okay, if I tried that and I was like, hey, we're gonna have practice online, maybe 50% of the kids might show up once in a while. And
Yeah.
to have 95% attendance is
Yeah.
insane. It's
Yeah.
something's working right. Definitely.
Something's working really well over there. Yeah, my big takeaways, I have two actually. The one was how he links the IB learner profile and the IB to his programs. It's something that we forget sometimes, but they're so connected, and it's something that I'm going to work on definitely. And the second one is how he continues to to grow as a professional. And especially the part where he was talking about going to a different school, when to go there, what to do. We all want to, we all have our big goals in mind, right? We want to go to this kind of place and in the future, but take your time, go when you're ready, accomplish your goals, build your legacy, and then the time will come. So have that patience. So that's great advice from John for all ADs and upcoming ADs, actually.
Yeah, it was very down to earth with the whole process, realizing it's going to take time. Often you start at a smaller school, you have beginnings, and then from there you learn and you grow and you connect, and then you go on to these much bigger schools. So yeah, just a really down to earth guy, great to talk to, and somebody we'll definitely keep in touch with on and off the podcast.
Yeah, 100%. And as he mentioned, especially connect to people, these ADs who know more than you need, because sometimes you're in a more isolated situation like we are. So reach out and learn from them and make mistakes and just, try to improve your programs and yourself. So John, thank you again. Awesome interview.
Yeah, great interview. And thanks for anyone who's listening or watching. Like and subscribe if you want to get in contact with us. Our information's down below. I know a lot of people on LinkedIn. So if you're not on LinkedIn as an athletic director, that's a great place to go. Just and connect with us. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.